And welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff_2020. And this morning I'm very glad to bring back to our channel Harley Schlanger of the LaRouche organization, who is joining us with a kind of a very hard cutoff at 55 minutes to the hour. So we will try to use the time that we have, and we're very grateful for it. As efficiently as possible by bringing Harley right on up to the screen and wishing Harley Schlanger a very happy new year. How are you, Harley?
Fine, John. Same to you and all your viewers. And one thing you have to admit, this has been an eventful year so far.
Okay, it certainly has been. I almost lost your audio there, but you're good. A very eventful year indeed, and 21 is just 11 days into it, and wow, everything is just happening so fast. Everything that I was really concerned was going to happen, Harley, it seems to be happening.
Well, I think the important thing to realize is there's a very desperate grouping in the transatlantic establishment. They're desperate because they don't want anything to interfere with what they're planning with a Biden administration, namely the Great Reset and a return to the strategic policies of the Bush and Obama era. And so we see this thing now, that the rush to get Trump out of there. What's the rush? Is it really they're afraid that he's going to lead mobs of people into the Congress? This has to do with moving toward a new phase of the post 9/11 security state, with increased censorship and with a increased control given to the central banks. And they're very frightened that there would be a backlash. And so what they did is they took advantage of what happened on January 6th to escalate the coup attempt against Donald Trump.
And again, I don't know what there is to be gained except for to keep the momentum. It's like an attack is underway and they can't lose the momentum, so they keep throwing more and more ammunition at the enemy, even if the enemy has already started to withdraw from the field. So now we have a serious attempt to completely delegitimize the entire Trump administration and everybody who has supported Donald Trump, no matter what their intentions, no matter what was in their hearts when they went to the Capitol, when they went there to answer the president's call to support his constitutional attempt to retain power against what he sees and what a lot of other people see as having been a fraudulent election. So these good-hearted people are now getting labeled. They're getting put into dossiers and categories from all of the surveillance activity that went on. They went there knowing that this was probably going to happen, that they'd get doxxed, that they'd get accused of being part of a mob, which if you've seen the reports that I have, it's quite obvious that there were maybe 50 or 60 or maybe as many as 100 really agitators with, doing violent things. And everybody else is just kind of standing around watching, thinking, what's this about? So that's my experience. I wonder how it's seen from your perspective.
Well, it reminded me a lot of what happened in Maidan Square in February 2014. Where you had demonstrators. You hear me?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, there were demonstrators both supporting the Yanukovych government and the opposition. And what happened is someone started shooting from the rooftops, and the opposition blamed it on the Yanukovych forces, the government forces, and the government said it wasn't coming from them, it was coming from a third force. And we've seen this before. If you know anything about Operation Gladio, the deployment of false flags and terror operations to sow confusion. But here's the real point. They weren't just trying to delegitimize the numbers of people who showed up to protest the vote. they delegitimized at least 74, 75 million people who voted for Donald Trump, because the message the media is sending and the Democratic politicians are sending, and now increasingly a number of weak-kneed Republicans, is that if you voted for Trump, you were a sap. You were used. You voted for someone who is a completely unstable, authoritarian derelict, and that therefore you were used, you were ignorant. And so this is actually a way of trying to put the genie back in the bottle, to say that this whole movement is illegitimate. And that's why they're going to go for impeachment. They're trying to pressure Pence and the cabinet to go for the 25th Amendment. And John, I would just point out, I was just rereading this article from, I think it was the January 17th or January 20th, 2017 London Spectator, an article which was headlined, "How Will the Trump Administration End?" This is 2 days before his inauguration. Will it be assassination, impeachment, or the 25th Amendment? So there's been a scenario for this going on since, not just since he was inaugurated, but going back to the spring of 2016, when he started to take over the Republican Party. So you have to go to the deeper background. Who has the capability to do this, to run these kinds of intelligence operations, including the possibility of cyber fraud? You know, this isn't something that can be done by a local, urban, corrupt political machine. They do the traditional ballot stuffing. But what it looks like to many experts is that there was something different that included a large dump of votes that were not really votes. And so when people try to call for an investigation, what happens? Judges wouldn't investigate. You know, here's Bill Barr, who was asked to investigate it, and he said, well, there's no evidence of fraud. And one thing, Rudy Giuliani responded to that by saying, you didn't interrogate a single witness. You didn't seize a single machine and investigate it. How can you say there's no evidence? Well, that's what was presented, in a sense, a fait accompli for a coup. Now, then we see people protesting, and they're being called crazy, anti-democratic, a fascist mob. And so what I've been saying is it's a lot like two different things. The Reichstag fire, for one, where an event took place which was then used as an excuse for a top-down police state to come into power. And secondly, like 9/11, to use this to justify an escalation of NSA spying and censorship and shutting down independent voices, whether they're press or simply the average person. So I think that's what this coup represents. And that's where things stand as of this moment.
Yes, and we're right in the middle of this coup. As you and I were talking, as I was having a hard time getting connected to you, we are, it's possible that they will pull the plug on the internet at just about any time. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know any more here in Maryland than you do over there in Germany. And it's unsettling to just not know what's happening. What do you hear from the Mike Flynn, Sidney Powell folks? You all know any more than we do about, suddenly what seemed to be a Mike Flynn driven movement is just kind of disappeared. He talks on some videos, I think, but I think he's lost his edge, his ability to lead. I don't think he's leading.
Well, I hesitate to make a judgment on what General Flynn is doing, although I will say one thing. Sidney Powell was going in the right direction, but she touched the third rail when she started talking about British intelligence and talking about Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who's on the board of Smartmatic voting machines or voting systems. Lord Malloch Brown is a member of the Privy Council, which means he's very high up in the networks of the British monarchy and British intelligence. He's also not just a sidekick of George Soros, he's probably Soros's controller. And Soros named him the new head of the Open Society Foundation. And this is who Sidney Powell was talking about when she first took over the case. Now, immediately, some intelligence people jumped in and said, no, 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 it's China, it's China. Then we heard about a mythical shootout in Frankfurt. Now we're hearing about the Italian job. The one thing I'd say about this Italian question is it's certainly more plausible than the CIA Army SEALs having a shootout in Frankfurt. But from what I can tell from my Italian sources, it didn't happen the way that it's being portrayed. And what they're doing is taking the eye off the ball. The operation against Trump has always been directed by three aspects of the British intelligence operation. One is British intelligence itself, which serves under the authority of the Queen. It's not the Parliament. It's under the Queen. And then the third element of this is the City of London. And they coordinate with the CIA, the NSA, the FBI. I had a discussion with Roger Stone a couple of weeks ago on what he was looking at. And he said, if you want to find the fraud, you have to look in the computers of the NSA and the CIA. And I don't think that's been done. Now, some people say it has been. If it has been, great. Let's see the evidence. But I think people are being strung along. And that's probably why we're not hearing a whole lot yet from Michael Flynn. But the really important thing, John, is that it's those intelligence agencies that have the capability to do this, and also the motivation. Their motivation is that the global financial system is in a breakdown crisis. This is now escalated far beyond what happened in 2008. There's a debt bomb that's set to explode, and they're trying to move toward this, what they call a financial regime change. And at the center of it is Wall Street operatives, City of London operatives, and BlackRock. You know, some people were questioning when Trump did the initial CARES Act, and when Congress did the CARES Act, is the Treasury taking over the Fed? Actually, what happened is the Federal Reserve became a hedge fund, and under the direction of BlackRock, bailing out the swindlers, bailing out the speculators, and crushing any potential for credit to go to the real economy. And that's the direction they want to go. Furthermore, they want to go into the Green New Deal. They want to have green carbon credits, they want to have green taxes, and they want to shut down industrial production. So this is what the coup has been about from the beginning. Donald Trump wanted to revive American manufacturing. He wanted to break with the free trade deals. He wanted to break with the Paris Climate Conference, which he did. Biden said the first thing he'll do is bring us back into Paris. So I think the line of demarcation is clear. The question is, can we get a mobilization in the population to stop it? And by that, I mean through nonviolence, through a mobilization that forces elected officials to not go along with this Green New Deal and this great reset. That's going to be the fight ahead.
I'm looking for how to proceed, and I'm a little bit concerned that the best thing to do is to just be silent for a while and let them play their cards, because the crowd that they have built up in support of their coup is so large and vocal that a voice like mine right now would just be shouted down if I were to go out and talk to my liberal friends. That they're ready, for well, I won't say what they're ready for, but
for the guillotine. They're ready for the guillotine.
I didn't want to say that.
Jacobinism.
Well, yeah, I hate to think of it, but they are. Their minds have been. There's a switch that's just been thrown, and I can't talk to them sometimes. It's so tragic. So, yeah, that's the question. How do we go forward? How do we convince other people that it's possible that we might be right, so that they should put their guards down and actually listen?
Well, first of all, I think that's who you're talking to. That's who many of the people who have been shut down by YouTube and Twitter and the other platforms. What we've been talking to is the people who turned out and voted for Donald Trump. In spite of 4 years of slander and lies, he still got 74, 75 million votes. Now, most of those people voted for him in spite of the loud voices of and I would call them liberals, I would call them neoliberals, and in some cases, neoliberal fascists. Because anyone who supports a Biden regime, which is going to be a war policy regime and the Great Reset regime, whether they know it or not, is supporting the imposition of the policies of someone named Hjalmar Schacht, who is Hitler's Minister of Finance, who operated on behalf of cartel and the Standard Oil Rockefeller cartel with the German, the various rubber companies, the banks. Many of them supported Hitler. Corporatist coup.
Harley, we're losing our
and
connection.
Now, the global corporations.
As soon as you said, Harley, as soon as you said Hjalmar Schacht, the audio started to deteriorate, and now the video is deteriorating, and I have a notice that we have a poor connection. So I think they're a little sensitive to certain things, and what you were saying, I'll just repeat it because I know what you were saying, was that Hjalmar Schacht was I.G. Farben's financial mastermind, and it was his policies that are being repeated today in this country. I think we're back now. If you want to, flesh that out a little bit in your own.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. That Schacht was the connection between the Rockefeller harem and interest in the United States with the Bank of England, Sir Montague Norman in London, and a Farben, Krupp-Thyssen interest in Germany and the Schroeder Bank. And what they wanted was war. They were figuring the only way to cover the debts would be to have a war and have a war economy. And that's what they did in Germany. And the Schachtian policy is exactly what would be a modern upgrade, what the Great Reset is. That the bankers and the corporations would dictate the credit terms and also the spending policy of government. I think what people haven't heard is that Larry Fink and his crew at BlackRock put together a proposal that said that the problem with having elected governments make spending policy is they tend to reflect the interests of their constituents, at least at some point. That's dangerous for the bankers and for the people who have created this giant debt bubble. They want teams of technocrats working directly under the biggest private banks with the central banks to not only determine monetary credit policy, but spending policy. That would mean they would direct credit to whoever they need to bail them out. That is the corporations that are zombie corporations that don't make enough income to cover the interest on their debt, to bail out the bankers, bail out the speculators, but nothing for the physical economy and nothing for the people. That's a Schachtian policy. And that's what the Janet Yellen has indicated she's going to do. She's in on this. And they tie it to the green policy to confuse a bunch of stupid liberals who think that we're frying the planet because we have industry.
Neoliberals, of course.
Yes.
It is a problem that has been created just exactly as Joseph Goebbels may have planned it, so many years ago, to repeat the big lie, to continue to repeat over and over again the stories about climate change and putting Greta Thunberg on the cover of everything and making a heroine out of her. It's if you study the way the Nazis got started, you see they did the same thing with their youth, their folk movement, the folk the return to nature and sit around a campfire with a guitar, that was all done back in the teens and 20s to set up the what became the Nazi Holocaust. And these things are history repeating themselves. I follow Kirk Wiebe on Twitter now, and one of his comments kind of really stuck with me from last night. He said, first they destroy your history, then they write a new history, and pretty soon nobody remembers, what went on in the past. And Fahrenheit 451 and on all of this, all these Twitter purges, YouTube purges. The libraries, as far as I can tell, if you go to a public library, you get a bunch of dreck and videotapes and, romances and stuff, but I don't see the necessary research tools that used to be there when I could go there and look into the periodical review or the Encyclopedia Britannica or all kinds of sources. I really do think that we're looking at the another instance of what one of my favorite books is titled, and that is The Closing of the Western Mind, which happened in the Middle Ages to create the Dark Ages. I think they're going to do it again.
Well, I think we're definitely in a dark age. And let me give you an example of what you were just talking about, rewriting history. One of the things Pelosi said on the Sunday shows is that the so-called riot on January 6th was a gift to Putin. Now, what does Russia have to do with what happened in the Congress? Were there FSB agents who were no longer on the Navalny case, who were in there trying to provoke a riot? This is the complete fraud. It's been disproven repeatedly that there was no Russian hacking, no Russian meddling, no Trump collusion with Russia. And yet that's still the line that's coming out of the Democrats. So you have that as one element of it. Now, the second element, I saw a very fascinating interview with Edward Snowden the other day. I think it was with John Stossel. And it's a long interview, but toward the end, he was talking about how big tech works. And he said, first of all, it's not just that they censor, although that's terrible. That shouldn't happen. Secondly, they lie as part of the censorship. And then third, they manipulate you with their advertisements and using your profile. But he said it's even worse than that. The internet was developed by people who figured out they could change the way people think. And if you go back 20, 30 years, John, people used to read books. I think this is what you're getting at. They used to sit in a chair at night, turn on a light, sit back and relax and read a book. Now, with the social media, with people relying on their cell phones, mobile phones for information, they're constantly distracted by multitasking, different things that pop up. All of a sudden, an article that looks interesting they click on and they forget where they were. And what Snowden said is that the neural pathways of the mind, how the mind works, are being changed by the way the social network causes you to think. And I think that's really important because if you can keep people not just ignorant, but uninterested in the kind of critical thinking that's necessary to solve the problems that are real problems that we face, then you can manipulate them much more easily with a big lie.
Very well said, and it shows that you really understand the techniques and the things that I've been studying for the past 5 years. You and your colleagues at LaRouche organization have been studying for decades, and sharing your perspective is priceless to me. I'm very, very grateful for that, Harley. Thank you.
And John, if you look at where some of this stuff comes from, you look at the Huxleys, Aldous and Julian Huxley. You look at people like, well, Orwell was he exposing something or was he giving people ideas? The dystopians like H.G. Wells, the philosophical perverts like Bertrand Russell. And then, most important, the Psychological Deployment Center of Tavistock Institute in Great Britain. which studies, along with Oxford, studies culture and how to use people's cultural proclivities, their profiles, to manipulate them and get them to have to choose between false choices. And so, austerity or government spending. Well, those aren't the choices. The third choice is the American system, credit for production. But that's been written out of economic thinking. The idea of confrontation with Russia and China or submitting to the Chinese Communist Party. Those aren't the choices. Donald Trump tried to have negotiated cooperative agreements with both Russia and China, which were sabotaged by the people who are running Russiagate against him. So if you can create a situation where people are given two bad choices and they choose one of them based on their profiles, or am I a leftist? Am I a rightist? A liberal, conservative, socialist? This is the way they manipulate things. And then you destroy science. You turn science into the kind of crackpot global warming nonsense where you had this hockey stick curve, which is completely discredited. But that shaped the early part of the so-called global warming movement. So this is really a devious, it goes beyond distraction, diversion, and lying. It really is aimed at destroying people's ability to do any kind of critical evaluation.
Yes, it is. And all we can do is spread the word the best we can to let other people understand it. This is true. And unfortunately, there are people I've tried to talk to that seem to have already been affected by this to the point where they can't. They've lost the idea or even the understanding that there is such a thing as critical thinking. I thank God that I got the... Yeah, or truth.
Or
Oh,
truth.
oh boy, that's a subject that really bothers me. The psychology and the idea that, well, you have your truth and other people have their truth, and it's the destruction of the objectivity of truth, just like the destruction of the objectivity of justice in favor of an imperially imposed justice in the ancient Roman form that I've been learning about that says, if you want to know what justice is, ask the emperor.
Right. Well, we had a perfect example of that last week in the Julian Assange case. Here's someone who should be seen as a hero because he exposed war crimes. But the war criminals control the governments that control the courts. And so he's being slowly killed, not even that slowly, for doing what? For telling the truth, for publishing the truth. How can you say America is a nation of free speech and freedom of the press when someone who tells the story is, first of all, they say he's not a journalist, but secondly, they say that he endangered national security? No, sending American troops into countries and destroying those countries, that's what's harmed our security. And so then you speak about doublespeak. The magistrate who heard his extradition case she ruled against his extradition. And the reason she gave was not because he was innocent. She said that the people who brought the charges under the Espionage Act were acting in good faith. So therefore, he should be extradited, except he'll probably be killed in an American prison. So then Assange appeals for bail, and she says, oh, no, he's a flight risk. We're going to keep him in Belmarsh prison until the appeals are heard, which could be another year or two.
Oh, my God.
So this is sort of an encapsulation of the insanity of what we're talking about. And I would urge anyone who has a phone or an email account or an ability to reach the White House to urge President Trump to pardon Assange and Snowden and to exonerate Lyndon LaRouche, who was the first real case of this kind of prosecutorial killing. And I think, one of the advantages is if Trump were to do that, then it would first of all infuriate the people who are running this coup against him. But secondly, it would give the American people, hopefully, access to the real story about what happened with Russiagate and WikiLeaks.
Amen. I don't know how many more voices need to be heard on that point, but clearly not enough have shouted it out yet. So, free Julian Assange, give him a pardon. Absolutely, give him a pardon now.
You know who's spoken out on that recently? People like Ron Paul and Rand Paul, Sarah Palin, Roger Stone. So this is a perfect example of something that's not a left-right issue, but it's an issue of our constitutional protections. And now, as we see this escalation of censorship, it becomes even more important that voices be heard.
Dr. Catherine Horton has resurfaced rather quickly on social media, talking to Bill Binney, your colleague, or a man who has consulted with you guys many, many times, and raised the concern of attacks upon him, as which he is verifying now on his own channel that there are what she calls direct energy attacks going on. I wonder if you or your colleagues suffered anything like that, or have you had the opportunity to discuss it with Mr. Binney as to, just to feel out for yourself what's going on?
Well, as you know, Bill has been very outspoken in his expose of the fraud of the Russia hacking. He did a real forensic analysis, and it turned a lot of guns back on him. So he's very concerned about that. But he's one of these people who's a true whistleblower, who is so committed to fighting for the Constitution and the First Amendment. I mean, he risked everything when he went up against his superiors at the National Security Agency. They raided his house. So, Bill is a very courageous man, a very honest man. But it's really important that people realize that people who do this, who speak out like this, get targeted. That's why Lyndon LaRouche ended up with a 15-year jail term, not because of anything he did wrong, but like Assange and Snowden and Binney, for what he was doing right, to expose the corruption of this criminal cabal, which some people call the deep state or the swamp, but is really the interlocking conglomerates of corporate cartels, of finance, now of the Silicon Valley big tech, with the defense contractors and with the media, which is another cartel. So, one of the things that I think would be worth looking at is whether there can be anti-monopoly action taken against big tech. Big tech hides behind this argument that, well, the First Amendment is about government shall pass no laws that infringe on the right to free speech and freedom of the press, but we're a private company, so we're not covered by that. Well, that's why you have government regulation, to protect the people from corrupt private interests. That's what our Constitution is all about. So we shouldn't let big tech get away with this any more than we should allow the banks to get away with carrying out speculative swindles and then sticking up the price tag when they get bailed out.
Wow. Thank you for that. I really just do have to pray for people like Bill Binney. He's not a young man, and to be subjected to attacks of an unknown nature, but to be absolutely clear that is what's happening to him, should send a message to everybody that loves freedom, the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, the freedom to be a human. Harley, anything else you want to add today? I know you have to go in a couple of minutes, and I want to just make sure that we have everybody educated as to how to find your voice, what's going on from your point of view in the world, and how best to help you guys at LaRouche Organization. I mentioned a little earlier to folks that you have reorganized a little bit. Maybe tell us about that and how to keep in touch.
Well, the main thing is we have a new website, which is you can find it by going to the LaRouche organization. But if you want to get, I'm still doing daily updates that are posted every day. And you can find, the best way to find them is send me an email and I'll send you a link. So you can reach me at harleysch@gmail.com. Now, I know a lot of people are suspicious about Gmail and Google, but for the time being, if you want to get access to my material for free, I'll send you the link so you can sign up. But send it to me at harleysch@gmail.com. And in conclusion, John, I'd just like to say what you just said about freedom of thought, the ability to be able to make your own decision and be able to stand up and if you're right, be able to have an opportunity to prove it. That's what the American system was about, because a lot of ideas that are now mainstream today started out as considered to be somewhat kookish, including the idea of institutions of self-government. And the reason that that was considered wild was because the British monarchy did everything they could to stamp out the rebellion that was organized by Ben Franklin and the Founding Fathers. So we have a tradition. Learn about that tradition, cherish that tradition, and join with us at the LaRouche organization to defend it, as well as the other groups that are out there fighting for this. So, I would just say to people, don't give up. We have a great history, a great tradition. And we've had crises before. We've had traitors before. We've always managed to have enough of the American optimism and grit and courage to prevail. And that's what it's going to take today.
All right, Harley Schlanger, thank you so much. And we'll be watching you. I watch you every morning, and you're on YouTube and on Facebook. So just look for Harley Schlanger and definitely send him an email to sign up for his daily reports. All right, everybody, thanks for being with us this morning here from Mystery Island, and Harley Schlanger from Berlin, Germany. What a morning, what a day, and the things we've talked about this morning are far, far more momentous than the average show. I hope people take these things to heart. Spread the word, and let's overcome this attempt at a coup against the United States of America. Thank you very much, Harley.
Okay, John. I guess I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
That's great. I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Okay.